Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the latest episode of Hardcore Photography. I'm your host, Mike, and I'm here with my good friend, Sticky Rick. Let's see what else we got going on. So, you got yourself a new couple of lenses just over the last couple of weeks or so.
Yeah.
And you say we talked about it the last time, but I think it got lost in when it didn't record. And I think you were talking about how the lenses that you got, you were trying to get a 50 millimeter focal length. Well, technically it's not I guess technically it is. You're trying to get the 50 millimeter look. For those who don't know, if you're new to photography or if you're new to cameras, or if you try, like when we did a couple months ago, we did the thing about the wide and the ultra wide lens, but without focal correction, so that we got the barrel distortion, the lens distortion, and then Rick ended up getting a fisheye and did some work with that. For those who don't know, there's a certain amount of distortion, and it's hard to explain. But what happens is when you have a shorter focal length, you are picking up the human eye. The standard lens is 35 to 50, and that's why they call that a standard lens, because that's what we see between 35 and 50. Or we have the perception of a 35 millimeter lens to a 50 millimeter lens. But if you get a shorter focal length, the width that it picks up is actually wider than the human eye can see. And so in order to do that, it has to squeeze that down into a smaller area. And when it does that, it distorts to a certain extent. If you ever shoot a picture with some cell, I've got a cell phone that really did it, or if you do it with a really short focal length and you shoot somebody's face, sometimes they look a little distorted, like almost the middle of their face is rounded out, like their nose will be freaking huge, and it's like they're looking to a fish bowl and they're looking at you, and that's focal that's lens distortion. So you were trying to get a 50 millimeter, and that ends, perceptibly, it usually ends between around about 35 millimeters. And to 50 millimeters. And then when you start moving past that, you start getting another kind of change. They call it compression, but we won't go into that. So you were trying to get lenses that would give you a 50 millimeter look for doing portraiture.
Right. Something that would give me that very, very good looking foreground with the nice bokeh in the background.
Yeah. For those who don't know, portraiture lenses, the best, generally a good choice for portraiture lens is between 50 and 90 millimeters. You can do larger than that, but the problem is that you have to back way out, and it gets a little weird. I saw a guy shoot a big telephoto, looked like maybe a 200 millimeter lens. But the thing is the studio he was in was probably 100 feet long, and he was shooting this girl on a stool, but he was like, halfway across the room. It was freaking ridiculous. So the reason why you usually end at about 90 is because you end up having to get so far away from your subject that it becomes a problem.
Okay.
So you figured out that because of the math, because most focal length lenses they're using full frame, which is 35, which is the same dimensions as a 35 millimeter film frame.
Right.
To figure out their the focal length and the apparent focal length. And what you figured out was that because of what you were doing, you could hit about a 44 millimeter because you're using a cropped sensor camera. And then you pointed out some things just today about that other lens that you bought that when you figured it out, it wasn't quite what you thought it was going to be. So how do you now? I know to get that, the focal length, and I'm still not really clear on that. But you're telling you're okay. So if I grab a 50 millimeter full frame and I throw it onto a a crop sensor. Now there's different size sensors, but we'll just go with the APC because that's the most common. If I take a 50 millimeter lens and I put it on an APC camera, what focal length? What actual focal length am I going to get?
Well, I hear different things. 1.4 and 1.6 are the numbers always thrown out there. I generally just cut it in half and say 1.5. So let's say I put on a 50 millimeter lens. I'm more or less getting a 75 millimeter look.
Oh, so it goes up. Oh, it goes up. Okay.
Right, because it's 1.5 times whatever. Like I said, I can't remember if it's a 1.4 or 1.6. I guess it depends on the camera you got, the ASP crop.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So generally, but I'll be honest with you, I bought a cheap Chinese 35 and a cheap Chinese 50, and they both look great. They both have the exact look I was going for, so it's nice.
Okay, cool. So if you hit a 35, you're gonna end up with roughly 45. No, you're gonna end up with a little bit bigger than that. So 45, that would be you end up with about a 47.
Yeah,
if you throw a 35 down, yeah, that's pretty close.
And to be honest with you, and after thinking about, because I also, like I said, I bought that 10 to 20 lens, Sigma. It's actually made for a crop sensor camera, which I don't know why they call it a 10 to 20 then, because when you put it on a full frame camera, yes, it is 10 to 20 when you put on a full frame camera, but the vignetting is so drastic that you're going to crop out, a good 1.5% of your picture.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have to take that into account when you're doing that. It's like when you're doing. Go ahead.
But the point is, why call it a 10 to 20 then? Because because technically it's not, because you can't get a 10 to 20 look out of it.
Yeah, but maybe it's because they decided that full frame 35 millimeters is de facto size, and so they have to build everything off of that, so you have a reference point off of so that everybody has a static reference point to build from.
Gotcha.
And maybe that's why they did that, because I was wondering about that, because I know there's a lot of other as far as the smaller sensor under the 35, it's usually APC, but there's a micro four thirds and there's a couple other things. So you're going to end up with it's going to be difficult because you're not going to have a consistent reference point to start with. So I'm wondering if maybe they did that, because I'm wondering too why. Well, here's the thing. I hear a lot of people complain about 35 millimeter, and I hear a lot of people, they're like medium format or large format purists, but they're full of shit anyway, because what is the most popular film format out? 35 millimeter, and
right.
it's so popular that digital uses that as their reference point when they say full frame. When you hear the term full frame, what they're referring to is the dimensions of a 35 millimeter film frame. I'm guessing that they must have decided that the 35 millimeter, because it's so popular, is the de facto reference point for all things focal length and
if it's the image capture of the human eye, I would say that's probably why it's become the de facto.
Oh, because it's 35 to match up with the eye. Well, yeah, that makes sense, because I know that the 35 millimeter lens. Well, I've heard both, that the 35 is the way we see and the 50 is the way we see, but there's really, there's 40, there's focal lengths in between 35 and 50. I've seen 44s and 45s. Minolta, I think, uses this, and Rakonen uses a 45. That's real common for them, but yeah, so maybe that's why it's not it just so happened that the 35 millimeter frame matched up with the perception of the human eye.
Right. But
Yeah.
I kind of when I was talking to you this morning, I got so down about the fact that it's not what I want. Because my thing is, I wanted a wide lens that wasn't a fisheye, so that I could get some of these pictures and use a. Here, I'll tell you exactly what happened. I was driving through New Mexico, and there are these real sheared off cliffs on a part of the. I think it's the 40 I was going through, the 40 or the 25. It was a sparse, cloudy day, and these sheared cliffs are like this deep red color, and I thought, my God, if I had my camera right now, wouldn't it be great to get a really wide lens on there and bulb it using a neutral density filter? You'd get that really dark, the blue would come off of that really dark, ominous color. If you went black and white with it.
Yeah.
And the clouds would just pop in the middle of it, because I really like that look. But then I went, yeah, but the only really wide angle you have is your fisheye. And I go, there's no way to put a filter on it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I even looked into, was there a way I could put a hood on it and then put a filter on the end of the hood?
Uh-huh.
But that thing has such a wide field of view on it that a lens hood will be caught in the shot. I mean, literally, when I use that camera, I can almost see behind me.
Yeah, well, because of the range of a field of view is I think it's over 100 degrees. It's practically it's damn near behind you.
Now the one I just bought is also it's 120 degrees. The field of view. Yeah,
it's in degree. Yeah.
But that's why I bought it. Is I wanted a non-fisheye lens that I could put a neutral density filter on. Now, while I was getting down on it the other day, this morning as I did more research on it, I started to think, this is like me paying attention to all the math and this is that and that is that. Now, granted, I have to keep some of that in mind to get when I'm doing research to figure out what I need to take the pictures I want to take. Some of it I have to pay attention to just so I know what I have to get. But if I'm spending all this time doing the math and this and that, all of a sudden it was like when I first started playing music and I was paying more attention to the math of music instead of, these chords have to go in this order and you have to play it like this. You lose the creativity of it when you start paying more attention to the science than the actual creativity of it. I need to start paying more attention to, this is what I got. What can I do with it?
Yeah, a lot of musicians that I see, a lot of the greats, they'll say that same thing. They'll say eventually that blurs out. You don't think in the terms of scales and positions and all that. Harmonic players and bassists normally, you don't think in the terms of scales and positions. You think in musicality, and it's the same thing in photography. You stop thinking about what you have and what you more commonly it's what you don't have that you ruminate about.
That's kind of where I'm standing right now. It's like I want to be able to take and don't get me wrong, that guy who said he could talk to us, sometime in December. God, his work is beautiful.
Yeah, he's got a lot of really great stuff going on, and he's doing he's supposed to be doing some let's see if we can get that guy's name.